It's MamaBorg's Fun Time Educational Hour. Hey guys and gals and everyone in between. It's MamaBorg again, and I am here to read the Ransom of Red Chief, the second short story for Corona Quarantine Homework Week 8, I think, which is May 4th through the 8th, 2020. The last story I read was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Kurt Vonnegut. And I'm pairing that with The Ransom of Red Chief, which was a recommendation from my Facebook friends. I'm looking for stories that kind of highlight the irony of the times that we're living in right now, where we are sometimes trapped with people for long periods of time. Hopefully you are all trapped with people that you like and you enjoy. I'm very fortunate to be trapped with my honey, although we're not trapped. But quarantined during this period of social isolation to kind of try to keep the incidences of corona down. So the last story was about multi-generational family all stuck together in an apartment in a world full of overpopulation. This story takes place in the past. The last story took place in the future. This takes place in the past. This is called The Ransom of Red Chief. It is a story by O. Henry. And this is a version that I got online. It is a PDF. And I'm going to do the split screen again where I read down here, just highlighting the text that you guys and gals have. You've got the definitions down here at the bottom of the page. Some of the words are down here at the bottom of the page. So use those as reference pieces whenever you need to. And I'm just going to read. The Ransom of Red Chief by O. Henry. It looked like a good thing, but wait till I tell you, we were down south in Alabama, Bill Driscoll and myself, when this kidnapping idea struck us. It was, as Bill afterward expressed, during a moment of temporary mental aberration. But we didn't find that out till later. There was a town down there as flat as a flannel cake, called Summit, of course. It contained inhabitants of as undulterious and self-satisfied a class of peasantry as ever clustered around a maypole. And if you look at undulterious, you can kind of look down here and it says harmless. So use that little footnote use that little footnote to take you down to the bottom and be able to read then what the definition is, what the term is. Bill and me had a joint capital of about $600, and we needed just $2,000 more to pull off a fraudulent town lot scheme in western Illinois. We talked it over on the front steps of the hotel. Philipprogenitive says and philipprogenitive is love for your children. It's a love for one's own children. Is strong in semi-rural communities. Therefore, and for other reasons, a kidnapping project ought to do better there than in the radius of newspapers that send reporters out in plain clothes to stir up and talk about such things. We knew that Summit couldn't get after us with anything stronger than constables and maybe some lackadaisical bloodhounds, and the diatribe or two in the Weekly Farmer's budget. So it looked like a good place to kidnap from. We selected for our victim the only child of a prominent citizen named Ebenezer Dorset. The father was respectable and tight, a mortgage financier and a stern, upright collection plate passer in foreclosure. The kid was a boy of 10 with bas-relief freckles and hair the color of the cover of a magazine you buy at a newsstand when you want to catch a train. His hair was red, and bas-relief means his freckles stood out really brightly on his face. Bill and me figured that Ebenezer would melt down for a ransom of $2,000 to a cent. But wait until I tell you. About 2 miles from Summit was a little mountain covered with a dense cedar brake. On the rear elevation of this mountain was a cave, and there we stored our provisions. You know what's kind of funny about this is it reminds me of the place where Lenny and George were hanging out before they make it to the ranch. Always lots of parallels based on what you read. One evening after sundown, we drove in a buggy past the old Dorset house. The kid was in the street throwing rocks at a kitten on the opposite fence. "Hey, little boy," says Bill, "would you like to have a nice bag of candy and a nice ride?" And the boy catches Bill neatly in the eye with a brick. So, characterization is how a character treats other people and things. This little boy is throwing rocks at a kitten, and when he's offered a bag of candy, he throws a rock at the face of the person offering him candy. So, already we get some sense that this little boy is not very nice. "That will cost the old man an extra $500, says Bill, climbing over the wheel. That boy put up a fight like a welterweight cinnamon bear. But at last, we got him down in the bottom of the buggy and drove away. We took him up to the cave and hitched the horse into the cedar brake. After dark, I drove the buggy to the little village 3 miles away where we had hired it and walked back to the mountain. Bill was pasting court plaster over the scratches and bruises on his features. So Bill's having to kind of repair himself from the damage that the boy has wrought on them in the process of kidnapping. There was a fire burning behind the big rock at the entrance of the cave, and the boy was watching a pot of boiling coffee with 2 buzzard tail feathers stuck in his red hair. He points a stick at me when I come up, and he says, "Ha, cursed paleface, do you dare enter the camp of the Red Chief, the terror of the plains?" He is all right now, says Bill, rolling up his trousers and examining some of the bruises on his shins. "We're playing Indian. We're making Buffalo Bill's show look like a magic lantern view of Palestine in the town hall. I'm old Hank the Trapper, Red Chief's captive, and I'm to be scalped at daybreak by Geronimo. That kid can kick hard." Yes, sir, the boy seemed to be having the time of his life. The fun of camping out in a cave made him forget that he was a captive himself. He immediately christened me Snake Eye the Spy and announced that when his braves returned from the warpath, I was to be broiled at the stake at the rising of the sun. Then we had supper, and he filled his mouth full of bacon and bread and gravy and began to talk. He made a during dinner speech something like this: "I like this fine. I never camped out before, but I had a pet possum once, and I was 9 last birthday. I hate to go to school. Rats ate up my 16 of Jimmy Talbot's aunt's speckled hen's eggs. Are there any real Indians in these woods? I want some more gravy. Does the tree moving make the wind blow? We had 5 puppies. What makes your nose so red, Hank? My father has lots of money. Are the stars hot? I whipped Ed Walker twice Saturday. I don't like girls. You dasn't catch toads unless with a string. Do oxen make any noise? Why are oranges round? Have you got to sleep in this cave? Amos Murray has got 6 toes, and a parrot can talk, but a monkey can't fish. A parrot can talk, but a monkey or a fish can't. How many does it take to make 12? Every few minutes, he would remember that he was an Indian and pick up his stick rifle and tiptoe to the mouth of the cave to search for scouts to search for the scouts of the hated paleface. Now and then he would let out a whoop that would make old Hank the Trapper shiver. The boy had Bill terrorized from the start. Red Chief, I says to the kid, would you like to go home? What for? He says. I don't have any fun at home. I hate to go to school. I like to camp out. You won't take me back home again, Snake Eye, will you? Not right away, says I. We'll stay here in the cave for a while. All right, says he. That'll be fine. I never had so much fun in my life. So a kid is kidnapped. He should be terrified, and instead he's having the time of his life. We all went to bed about 11 o'clock. We spread down some wide blankets and quilts and put Red Chief between us. We weren't afraid he'd run away. He kept us awake for 3 hours, jumping up and reaching for his rifle and screeching, "Hiss, pard!" in mine and Bill's ears as the fancied crackle of a twig or the rustle of a leaf revealed to his young imagination the stealthy approach of an outlaw band. At last, I fell into a troubled sleep and dreamed that I had been kidnapped and was chained to a tree by a ferocious pirate with a red hat. So this is a point of irony. The kid is imagining he hears the approach of an outlaw band when in fact he has been kidnapped by some outlaws. Also, The kidnappers are starting to feel a little terrorized by Little Red Chief, and our kidnapper dreams he had been kidnapped himself by a pirate with a red hat, symbolizing the child with red hair. My people. Just at daybreak, I was awakened by a series of awful screams from Bill, and they weren't yells or howls or shouts or whoops or yops, such as you would expect from a manly set of vocal organs. They were simply indecent, terrifying, humiliating screams, such as a woman might emit when they see caterpillars. It's an awful thing to hear a strong, desperate fat man scream incontinently in a cave at daybreak. I jumped up to see what the matter was, and Red Chief was sitting on Bill's chest with one hand twined in Bill's hair, and in the other he had a sharp case knife we used for slicing bacon. And he was industriously and realistically trying to take Bill's scalp, according to the sentence that had been pronounced upon him the evening before. I got the knife away from the kid and made him lie down again, but from that moment, Bill's spirit was broken. He laid down on his side of the bed and he never closed an eye again in sleep as long as the boy was with us. I dozed off for a while, but along toward sunup, I remembered Red Chief had said I would be burned at the stake at the rising of the sun. I mean, I wasn't nervous or afraid, but I sat up and leaned against a rock. "What you getting up so soon for, Sam?" asked Bill. "Me?" I says, "Oh, I got a kind of pain in my shoulder. I thought sitting up would rest it." "You're a liar," says Bill. "You're afraid you was to be burned at sunrise, and you was afraid he'd do it. And he would too. He could find a match. Ain't it awful, Sam? Do you think anybody will pay our money to get a little imp like that back home?" "Sure," said I. "A rowdy kid like that is just the kid parents dote on. Now, you and the chief get up and cook breakfast while I go up to the top of this mountain and reconnoiter." I went up to the peak of the little mountain, ran my eye over the contiguous vicinity. Over toward summit, I expected to see a sturdy yeomanry of the village armed with scythes and pitchforks, beating the countryside for the dastardly kidnappers. But what I saw was a peaceful landscape, dotted with one man plowing with a dun mule. Nobody was dragging the creek. No couriers dashed hither and yon, bringing tidings of no news to the distracted parents. There was a sylvan attitude of somnolent sleepiness pervading that section of the external outward surface of Alabama that lay exposed to my view. "Perhaps," says I to myself, "it has not yet been discovered that the wolves have borne away the tender lambkin from the fold. Heaven help the wolves," says I, and I went down the mountain to breakfast. When I got to the cave, I found Bill backed up against the side of it, breathing hard, and the boy threatening to smash him with the rock, half as big as a coconut. "He put a hot-boiled potato in my back," explained Bill, "and then he mashed it with his foot, and I boxed his ears. Have you got a gun about you, Sam?" I took the rock from the boy and kind of patched up the argument. "I'll fix you," says the kid to Bill. "No man ever yet struck the Red Chief, and you got paid for it. You better beware." After breakfast, the kid takes a piece of leather with strings wrapped around it out of his pocket and goes outside the cave, unwinding it. "What's he up to now?" says Bill anxiously. "You don't think he'll run away now, do you, Sam?" "No fear of it," says I. "He don't seem to be much of a homebody, but we've got to fix up some plan about the ransom. There don't seem to be much excitement down there on Summit on account of his disappearance, but maybe they haven't realized that he's gone yet. His folks maybe think he spent the night with an Aunt Jane or one of the neighbors. Anyhow, he'll be missed today. Tonight we must get a message to his father demanding the $2,000 for his return." Just then we heard a kind of war whoop, just as David might have emitted when he knocked out the champion Goliath. And it was the sling that Red Chief had pulled out of his pocket, and he was whirling it around his head. I dodged and heard a heavy thud and the kind of sigh from Bill like a horse gives whenever you take his saddle off. A rock the size of an egg had caught Bill just behind his left ear. He loosened himself all over and fell into the fire, across the frying pan of hot water for washing the dishes, while I dragged him out and poured cold water on his head for about half an hour. By and by, Bill sat up and feels behind his ear. Sam, do you know who my favorite biblical character is? Take it easy, says I. You'll come to your senses presently. King Herod, he says. You won't go away and leave me here alone, will you, Sam? Bill's favorite character is King Herod because King Herod ordered the death of children whenever Jesus was being born. And so Bill is being sarcastic, we hope, here. Take it easy, says I. You'll come to your senses presently. King Herod, says he. You won't go away and leave me here alone, will you, Sam? I went out and caught the boy and shook him till his freckles rattled. If you don't behave, says I, I'll take you straight home. Now, are you going to be good or not? I was only funning, he says sullenly. I didn't mean to hurt old Hank. But what did he hit me for? I'll behave, Snake Eye, if you won't send me home and you'll let me play the scouts today. I don't know the game, says I. And that's for you and Mr. Bill to decide. He is your playmate for the day. I'm going to go away for a while on business. Now you come in and make friends with him and say you're sorry for hurting him, or home you go at once. I made him and Bill shake hands, and then I took Bill aside and told him I was going to Poplar Grove, a little village 3 miles from the cave, to find out what I could about the kidnapping and how it had been regarded in Summit. Also, I thought it best to send a peremptory letter to the old man, Dorset, that day, demanding the ransom and dictating how it should be paid. You know, Sam, says Bill, I've stood by you without batting an eye through earthquakes, fire and flood, and poker games, dynamite outages, police raids, train robberies, and cyclones. I never lost my nerve yet till we kidnapped that 2-legged skyrocket of a kid. He's got me going. You won't leave me long with him, will you, Sam? I'll be back sometime this afternoon, says I. You must keep the boy amused and quiet till I return. And now we'll write a letter to old Dorset. Bill and I got paper and pencil and worked on the letter while Red Chief, up with a blanket wrapped around him, strutted up and down, guarding the mouth of the cave. Bill begged me tearfully to make the ransom $1,500 instead of $2,000. I ain't attempting, says he, to decry the celebrated moral aspect of parental affection, but we're dealing with humans, and it ain't human for anybody to give up $2,000 for that 40-pound chunk of freckled wildcat. I'm willing to take a chance at $1,500. You can charge the difference up to me. So this is becoming very ironic. The kidnappers now are reducing their ransom amount because Bill fears that if they ask too much, the parents won't want this kid back, because this kid's pretty terrible. So, to relieve Bill, I acceded, and we collaborated a letter that ran this way. Ebenezer Dorset, Esquire, we have your boy concealed in a place far from Summit. It is useless for you or the most skillful detectives to attempt to find him. Absolutely, the only terms on which you can have him restored to you are these. We demand $1,500 in large bills for his return. The money to be left at midnight tonight, at the same spot and in the same box as your reply, as hereinafter described. If you agree to these terms, send your answer in writing by a solitary messenger tonight at 8:30. After crossing Owl Creek on the road to Poplar Grove, there are 3 large trees about 100 yards apart, close to the fence of the wheat field on the right-hand side. At the bottom of the fence post, opposite the 3rd tree, there will be found a small pasteboard box. The messenger will place the answer in this box and then return immediately to Summit. If you attempt any treachery or fail to comply with our demand as stated, you will never see your boy again. If you pay the money as demanded, he will be returned to you safe and sound and well within 3 hours. These terms are final, and if you do not accede to them, no further communication will be attempted. 2 desperate men is how they signed it. I addressed this letter to Dorset and put it in my pocket. As I was about to start, the kid comes up to me and says, "Aw, Snake Eye, you said I could play the scout while you was gone." "We'll play it, of course," says I. "Mr. Bill will play with you. What kind of game is it?" "I am the scout," said Red Chief, "and I have to ride to the stockade to warn the settlers that Indians are coming. I'm tired of playing Indian myself. I want to be scout." "All right," says I. "It sounds harmless to me. I guess Mr. Bill will help you defeat the enemy." "What am I to do?" asked Bill, looking at the kid suspiciously. "You are the hoss," says the scout. "Get down on your hands and knees. How can I ride to the stockade without a hoss?" Hoss here means horse. "You better keep him interested," says I, "till we get the scheme going. Loosen up, man." Bill gets down on all fours and looks at the corner of his eye like a rabbit whenever you catch it in the trap. "How far's to the stockade, kid?" he asks in a husky manner of voice. 90 miles, says the kid. "And you have to hurry and get there on time. Whoa now!" And the scout jumps on Bill's back and digs his heels into his sides. "Oh, for heaven's sake," says Bill. "Hurry back, Sam, as soon as you can. I wish we hadn't made the ransom more than 1,000. Say, you quit kicking me, or I'll get up and warm you good." I walked over to the poplar grove and sat around the post office and store talking with the chaw bacons that came in to trade. Chaw bacons would be like the farmers, the old dudes that just sit around talking like they're chewing on bacon. Talking with the chaw bacons that come in to trade. One whiskerando says that he hears Summit is all upset on account of Elder Ebenezer Dorset's boy having been stolen, and that was all I needed to hear. I referred casually to the price of black-eyed peas, posted my letter surreptitiously, and came away. The postmaster said the mail carrier would come by in an hour to take the mail to Summit. When I got back to the cave, Bill and the boy were not to be found. I explored the vicinity of the cave, and I risked a yodel or two, but there was no response. So I sat down on a mossy bank to await developments. In about half an hour, I heard the bushes rustle, and Bill wobbled out into the little glade in front of the cave. Behind him was the kid, stepping softly like a scout, with a broad grin on his face. Bill stopped, took off his hat, and wiped his face with a red handkerchief. The kid stopped about 8 feet behind him. "Sam," says Bill, "I suppose you think I'm a renegade, but I couldn't help it. I'm a grown person with masculine proclivities and habits of self-defense, but there is a time when all systems of egotism and predominance fail. The boy is gone. I sent him home. All is off. There was martyrs in old times," goes on Bill, "that suffered death rather than give up the particular graft they enjoyed. None of them was ever subjugated to such tortures as I have been. I tried to be faithful to our articles of depredation, but there came a limit." "What's the trouble, Bill?" I asks him. "I was rode," says Bill, "to 90 miles to the stockade, not barring an inch. Then, when the settlers was rescued, I was given oats. Sand ain't a palatable substitute. And then, for an hour, I had to try to explain to him why there was nothing in holes and how the road can run both ways and what makes grass green. I tell you, Sam, a human can only stand so much. It takes him by the neck of his clothes, and I drags him down the mountain, and on the way he kicks my leg black and blue from the knees down, and I've got 2 or 3 miles, bites on my thumb, and my hand is cauterized. But he's gone," continues Bill, "gone home. I showed him the road to Summit and kicked him about 8 feet nearer. There at the kick, I'm sorry we lost the ransom, but it was either that or Bill Driscoll to the madhouse." Bill is puffing and blowing, but there is a look of ineffable peace and growing content on his rose-pink features. "Bill," says I, "is there any heart disease in your family?" "No," says Bill. "Nothing chronic except malaria and accidents. Why?" "Then you might turn around," says I, "and have a look behind you." Bill turns and sees the boy and loses his complexion and sits down plump on the ground and begins to pluck aimlessly at the grass and the little sticks. For an hour, I was afraid for his mind. And then I told him that my scheme was to put the whole job through immediately and that we would get the ransom and then just be off. And we'll be off with it by midnight if old Dorset fell in with our proposition. So Bill braced up enough to give the kid a weak sort of smile and promised to play Russian in a Japanese war with him as soon as he felt a little bit better. I had a scheme for collecting the ransom without danger of being caught by counterplots that ought to commend itself to professional kidnappers. The tree under which the answer was to be left and the money later on was close to the road fence with the big bare fields on all sides, and if a gang of constables should be watching for anyone to come for the note, they could see him a long way off, crossing the fields or in the road. But no siree. At 8:30, I was right up that tree and well hidden as a tree toad waiting for the messenger to arrive. Too clever. Exactly on time, a half-grown boy rides up the road on a bicycle, locates the pasteboard box at the foot of the fence, slips a folded piece of paper into it, and pedals off again back toward Summit. I waited an hour and then concluded the thing was square. I slid down the tree, got the note, slipped along the fence until I struck the woods, and was back at the cave in another half an hour. I opened the note, got near the lantern, and read it to Bill. It was written with a pen in a crabbed hand, and the sum and substance of it was this. Dear two desperate men, gentlemen, I received your letter today by post in regard to the ransom you asked for the return of my son. I think you are a little high in your demands, and I hereby make you a counter position, which I am inclined to believe you will accept. You bring Johnny home and pay me $250 in cash, and I agree to take him off your hands. You had better come at night, for the neighbors believe he is lost, and I couldn't be responsible for what they would do to anybody they saw bringing him back. Very respectfully, Ebenezer Dorset. Great pirates of Penzance, says I, of all the impudent. But I glanced at Bill and hesitated. He had the most appealing look in his eyes I ever saw on the face of a dumb or talking brute. Says he, well, what's $250? After all, we've got the money. One more night of this kid will send me to a bed in Bedlam. Besides, being a thorough gentleman, I think Mr. Dorset is a spendthrift for making us such a liberal offer. You ain't gonna let this chance go by, are you? I tell you the truth, says I. This little you lamb has somewhat got on my nerves, too. We'll take him home, pay the ransom, and make our getaway. We took him home that night. We got him to go by telling him that his father had bought him a silver-mounted rifle and a pair of moccasins for him, and we were to hunt bears the next day. It was just 12 o'clock when we knocked at Ebenezer's front door, just at the moment when I should have been abstracting the $1,500 from a box under the tree, according to the original proposition. Bill was counting out $250 into Dorset's hand. When the kid found out we were going to leave him at home, he started to howl like Calliope and fastened himself as tight as a leech to Bill's leg. His father peeled him away gradually, like porous plaster. How long can you hold him? Asks Bill. I'm not as strong as I used to be, says old Dorset, but I think I can promise you maybe 10 minutes. That's enough, says Bill. In 10 minutes, I shall cross the central, southern, middle western states and be legging it trippingly into the Canadian border. And as dark as it was, and as fat as Bill was, and as good a runner as I am, he was a good mile and a half out of Summit before I could even catch up with him. So, there you have it, the Ransom of Red Chief. Two kidnappers kidnap a kid expecting to make some money in the proposition, but the kid is so horrible, they pay the parents to take the child back. I think that's a nice story to pair with Tomorrow and Tomorrow in the midst of Corona quarantine. I hope some of you find this a little bit humorous, especially in light of the stories you've told me about your siblings. As usual, be safe, make smart choices, and I like you.